Hey, everyone, we'll just give folks maybe one more minute just to join us before we start.
Henry, give me 1 second here.
Yep. All right. Ready to go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our panel today. I'm Henry Lee, Director of Strategic Partnerships at ARM Treasure Data. I'm joined today by Aaron Hahn, Director of User and Customer Experience and Data Services at Promatica Consulting. Promatica is a boutique data-driven marketing agency that helps Fortune 500 companies on strategy, analytics, data management, personalization, media buying, and data architecture. Aaron has a wealth of agency and ad tech experience. He's worked at Spark Foundry, Viviki, Amnet, and Newstar. As a quick background, I'm Director of Strategic Partnerships at ARM Treasure Data. We are an enterprise software company that develops custom data platforms, or CDPs for short. For the uninitiated, CDPs help marketers collect, unify, analyze, and activate customer data that might be sitting in different data silos across your organization. We help over 500 global clients like Anheuser-Busch, Subaru, and Condé Nast improve customer segmentation, marketing personalization, and predictive next best action insights. Treasure Data is part of ARM, one of the world's leading semiconductor design companies. ARM's chip technology is used to power smartphones, servers, IoT devices, and 5G infrastructure. 95% of the world's smartphones, in fact, uses ARM technology, including the phone in your hand right now. So what's the connection between ARM and Treasure Data, you might ask? Well, ARM helps design chips that collect lots of data, and Treasure Data creates software that helps you manage all that data. So given Aaron's broad expertise in the agency world, we wanted to spend some time today to chat about some of the biggest trends we're seeing in the world. We will cover a few broad themes: DMPs versus CDPs, and data privacy. Some quick housekeeping. You can find more information about ARM Treasure Data in the attachment section of your BrightTalk screen below. Also, a recording of this webinar will be made available for those who may have missed. And also, feel free to submit questions throughout the BrightTalk throughout the presentation using the BrightTalk platform. And now, for our main act, let's dive in. So Aaron, so agencies have been facing industry headwinds for the past few years. With the rise of self-service programmatic advertising, brands are taking many media planning and execution services in-house. We're also in an economic recession. Media and advertising budgets are getting slashed. Group M recently forecast that US ad budgets would drop by 13% in 2020. In light of these challenges, how are agencies staying relevant to clients in today's changing environment?
Sure. And hello, Henry, and hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time. So I think that, this is kind of fundamentally why we're having this conversation. I think that agencies need to get smarter and, continuously understand what they can do with the different data signals that they have access to. I think that, any smart marketer is going to have a data-driven strategy, and, agencies are going to have to get better at understanding, what that means. There are different use cases. And again, this is what we're going to kind of chat about today, in terms of, what kind of data you have access to, how to kind of go about that process, how to turn that into some kind of activation strategy that you can then marry back to some kind of attribution. But yeah, in general, I think that fundamentally is something that, as we can see the marketplace continue to evolve. And again, why we're having this conversation. Agencies in general, need to get better.
Yeah, I would agree that we're definitely seeing some market shifts right now, and agencies are responding appropriately. In any kind of smart agency, it's kind of looking at new services, and that's actually a good segue to our next question. So at Treasure Data, we've noticed that more traditional agencies are starting to branch into new areas, especially around marketing technology advisory, data strategy, and data platform management. Now, this sounds like quite a leap from traditional media planning and execution that have been the main bread and butter for agencies for many, many years. Why do you think agencies are moving into this new area? And what will it take for agencies to be successful here?
Sure. So I think at the end of the day, this is like any kind of shift in any industry, in any marketplace. There are new pieces of technology that you have access to that you can now kind of assess and see what you can do with. I think that we remember going on, I'd say 10 years ago now, when programmatic and the rise of DSPs and SSPs, and again, new pieces of technology that agencies had to kind of assess and understand, and how to interact with. I see this being a very similar exercise in terms of the industry just needing to understand how to kind of work with the tech as it continues to evolve.
Do you feel that a lot of agencies need to scramble for a new type of talent, like more data-driven folks, more technical folks? How do agencies need to change their DNA to be successful here?
Sure. I think it's a little bit of both. I think again, as we continue to evolve, as the technology continues to evolve, I think that the skill sets will continue to evolve with them. I think that agencies will understand that media buying fundamentally, may change in the future, as things shift more and more digital, more and more customer journey focus. Again, depends on the use case and the clients you're working with. But I think that, there is, to your point, a fundamental understanding of that, part of the skill set that you're going to need to assess as an agency is, this technology is becoming, it's everywhere. And you're going to have to hire folks that are kind of comfortable working with it.
Makes a lot of sense. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about marketing technology, specifically data management platforms or DMPs. So some quick background on DMPs. So DMPs, data management platforms, they help marketers build custom audience segments, which they can then serve more personalized and relevant ads to. DMPs make available to marketers third-party data such as purchase history, brand propensity, demographics, even insights on interests and lifestyles. Marketers can use this data to create segments that reflect their target audience group. Segments like soccer moms who drive BMWs, or gadget gurus, or clean and green millennials. DMPs were created to help advertisers serve the right ads to the right person at the right time. So several years ago, DMPs were touted as being the cure-all for marketers' data challenges, from data collection to customized audience segmentation to seamless syndication across different ad platforms. The dream of quote-unquote real-time one-to-one omni-channel marketing might finally come true. Yet as reality sank in, more marketers started to see DMPs as quote-unquote being oversold and overpromised sometimes. Match rates weren't great, integrations to data providers and paid media weren't smooth, and day-to-day management of DMPs became cumbersome. Put simply, the marketing ROI from DMPs wasn't there. So as someone who has worked in the agency trenches, how did you position DMPs to clients, say, 5 years ago?
Sure. That's a great question. I think that, again, going back to, saying that this is a conversation at the end of the day about pieces of technology and really understanding how they work is, managing those expectations with your clients, really understanding, again, a very simple use case. If you have a DMP, that doesn't mean that you're going to tag 100% of your media, right? So if you, have something on Facebook or Google or, some other walled garden, again, that's a very simple caveat of, any insights that you pull into a DMP may only have, X% of your, it's not going to be 100% of your media that's going to be tagged or tracked, through that system. So, again, that's kind of just a very simple caveat. But again, I think that's, a lot of it was kind of around managing, those kind of expectations, again, focusing really on use cases, things like frequency. I think 5 years ago, identity resolution wasn't really at the forefront, but certainly something that was beginning to be discussed. Again, I think like any new piece of technology, it's really just about understanding what it can really do, specifically again for your use case and for your clients, and then managing those expectations accordingly, and not just really taking a deep dive and not just having the DMP be the shiny new object, or the shiny new acronym in the in the soup that we all eat every day. And really understanding again practically what it can do, and then what it can do specifically for.
Would you say that 5 years ago, maybe walled gardens were not as walled as they are today?
I think that I think I will kind of caveat this by saying that we are all approaching a cookie apocalypse. I think that more walled garden. I think that more publishers are becoming more aware of the value of their data. Again, we'll get into this a little bit later, but as first party or second party, depending on how you look at it, data becomes more and more important. We've seen more and more again publishers kind of double down on assessing the value of that data.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Great. Well, so fast forward to today. A lot of major brands have invested heavily in a DMP over the last few years. From your perspective, how have many of them maybe viewed their return on investment in their DMP, and how are you managing client expectations today?
Today, I think it's a lot about, again, going back to use cases. I think that, DMPs have been around long enough that you can understand what they can do fundamentally. So again, based on what your client is looking for, again, is it more media driven? Is it more, user and customer journey driven? Again, it really depends on, what kind of use case you're looking for. But I think now it's more not about, understanding really what the tech does, but, we've really gotten to the point of, okay, we understand what it can do. Now we can put together, kind of a list of, just a list again of use cases that would be most effective for, again, a certain, pharmaceutical client or a CPG client, or, kind of whatever vertical they fall into. And then, again, the data signals that they collect that come along with it.
Yeah, that makes sense here. So this is actually a good segue into another type of marketing technology that we hear a lot of today, and that's custom data platforms, also known as CDPs. So CDPs are similar to DMPs. They allow marketers to create segments around their customers, which they can then use to serve personalized messages, content, and offers to. CDPs are different, however, in how these segments are built. CDPs build segments using known first-party customer identifiers, such as email address, phone numbers, or login IDs. And these type of identifiers don't really change that often. DMPs, on the other hand, build segments using unknown anonymized data that are not necessarily tied to the actual customer. This includes third-party cookies or mobile ad IDs. And these type of IDs frequently do change. Cookies, for example, can be refreshed, reset, or even disabled. So CDPs are sometimes seen as the next evolutionary step for DMPs. Data privacy laws such as CCPA and GDPR also make it harder for marketers to track online browsing activity without getting explicit customer consent. And leading browsers like Chrome, Safari, and Firefox have already or are in the process of phasing out support of third-party cookies. So based on what you've seen out there, how much interest are you seeing now from clients for CDPs instead of DMPs? And what do you think is driving this growing interest for CDPs?
Sure. So I guess I'd take a step back and say, it's not even, I think, and up until now, we've been talking mostly about the technology. I think that this interest has come more just as a result of the kind of the data behind the tech. I think that as the industry focuses more on privacy, and there is more of an emphasis on first-party data and the importance of understanding who your customer is. Again, with the caveat being that it's understood that we are in a cookie apocalypse and that third-party cookies are going to go away soon. It kind of forces you to understand. Again, we need to start looking internally, seeing what value our first-party data has, and CDPs just offer a couple different ways to do that. That are maybe more. I'll say more comprehensive than a DMP, just again, based on the type of data that you can ingest, obviously the PII being notwithstanding, but I think it's more just, the industry has shifted this way, and CDPs can definitely benefit because of the emphasis that the technology has on getting the most out of first-party data.
Makes sense. You mentioned a really powerful word, cookie apocalypse here. Do you have any examples of what that means to some of your clients? Is it something that keeps them up at night, or how would you describe the cookie apocalypse?
Sure. I think that, again, it depends on the clients. I think that some, if they have a lot of first-party data, if they have a lot of engagement that they are collecting with their users, not even if it's mapped, to a customer journey, but even if they're collecting it, it's not necessarily as big as a concern, because they know that they can start that process of kind of mining the first-party data, if you will, and understanding how to map those customer journeys and start putting those together. I think that other clients who are less and not even by any fault of their own. For example, if you're, let's say a big CPG manufacturer, and you're not necessarily the retailer, you're not tracking every sale of every single, bag of chip or, piece of gum that you're selling at every Target or Walmart or gas station or 7-Eleven. So you might not have that same window into conversion data, if you will, that you would if you're, again, just in another industry or another vertical. So, I think in those cases, there is definitely more concern in terms of how do I still manufacture enough first-party engagement to, keep relevant insights and analytics going forward. But, again, I think a CDP can certainly help.
Yeah, you make a very good distinction. There are some clients that maybe have a lot of first-party data available just by the nature of their business, and they might be able to weather the storm better. They may be able to, they're not as affected as much by the cookie apocalypse. But there are other types of industries that may be more affected. Those that really rely, on a lot of consumers. So that's actually great that you kind of make that distinction here. So just wondering then, just based on that, what are some common use cases that CDPs can help clients solve for?
I would say the biggest one, and again, just, caveat, CCPA enforcement starts July 1st, which is next week. Privacy, is definitely a big one. An easy use case is, I get an email from the Gap and I decide I want to unsubscribe. I, as a consumer, would assume that also includes Gap outlets, Baby Gap, Kids Gap. But, again, Gap is a large company. Those email systems may be disparate, might not talk to each other, might be in silos, not just on the technology side, but also just from how the team is structured over at the organization. With CDP, again, ideally, you get that opt-out email. Those systems can kind of start talking to each other. You understand that this opt-out is coming from that same person, and you make sure that, again, Old Navy, again, depending on how large you want to go, but again, the point being that, if you get something like that from a single user, you can actually map back that, user, quote unquote, to a person and see if that user exists across other systems. And that's kind of, I guess, in my mind, the easiest use case for a DMP, just being able to take some of that anonymized and hashed data and be able to map it back to an actual person so that you can do more, again, for example, on the privacy side.
Yeah, you raised an excellent point. I can just imagine, yeah, you're absolutely right. Going to the Gap, I forget that the Gap might have a lot of sub-brands and other types of subsidiaries that I naturally assume I don't want to get marketed to. So just by going to, one part of the Gap means that how do I opt out across all the other properties of the Gap that maybe people don't always think about, Baby Gap, Old Navy, etc. So that's definitely a key point. And another thing that you mentioned is really being able to manage all that consent. So being able to work perhaps with consent management tools, consent management systems, so that you have a single source of truth saying that, hey, this customer opted in, but maybe next week they decide to opt out. And with privacy laws like CCPA, becoming more top of mind for everybody, becomes really paramount for us to sort of stay on top of things.
Sure.
So that makes a lot of sense. So on the flip side, how might DMPs be a better fit than CDPs? What are some limitations of CDPs?
Sure. So there are certainly, some use cases that work better on the DMP side. I think we kind of referenced one just now. If again, just by the nature of your organization, you don't really collect a lot of first-party data, or just not at the volumes that would be worth analyzing, you can still, use a DMP to mash that up with third-party data. Again, the easiest use case being for lookalike modeling. So there are certainly other things on the media side, a lot of frequency management you can do. I think that, there are other things, again, basically, not basically based on your vertical. If you are even, ingesting certain types of first-party data, if you don't necessarily need to map that back to a user, if there are certain, if there are certain engagements that you're only, really engaging through, one channel, I don't know if you necessarily need a CDP to, map everything back beyond what you're doing through your DMP. That would be a couple. That'd be a couple use cases for that.
Yeah, great. It sounds like a lot of marketers are still using DMPs, largely for prospecting, for advertising purposes. So yeah, I can see that. Not everyone has first party data, and in the case that they don't have first party data, they may still rely on DMPs to really do some form of targeted marketing.
Sure.
Yeah. So here's a question here. So you alluded to how companies need to better understand their data assets. How might a company do this? How might companies be able to perhaps do a data audit? We hear that from a lot of our clients, actually.
So I think that, fundamentally, this would be a very good time if you're any brand really to do a data audit. And, that's exactly what it sounds like. It's taking a step back and looking and seeing what data assets. And I think you have to look at, each data set you have as an asset and kind of start treating it that way. It's important to look at, what value you can get out of each data point that you might have access to. And I think that would be the other piece of the audit, just understanding, if you have a particular data set that you've identified, through an audit that you want to work with or that you want to explore, who's the owner of that? Is it at the brand or is it at the agency? How do you then go about analyzing it? But again, the purpose being is, I think that particularly now, with privacy being such a big deal, I would stress for any brand to, again, take a step back and say, okay, do I even understand, or do I even have in one place, what are all the data points that I am collecting, via, media engagement, site engagement, any other offline engagements, purchase data that they might have, but again, it's making sure that you understand what those are, and then potentially how you can then utilize them going forward.
Sounds great. What is a typical process? How long does a data audit take end to end?
Timeline wise, I would say, anywhere between, I'd say a proper one, any minimum of 3 months. I think it really takes time to, again, not just assess, kind of where these data points sit, in what silos, but also working with the different teams that own them, across, again, depending on the size of the organization, how disparate those data sets could potentially be. And really making sure that you have a working solution for, again, not just understanding, where they are and where they sit, but what potentially you can do with them, for either for insights or action.
Would you think that data audit's also important to be more, I guess, compliant with privacy laws? So in case, say, a customer says, "Hey, I want to exercise the right to be forgotten," help purge data that might sit in this remote little silo in this corner of the org. Do you think the data audit help folks map that?
Yeah, potentially. I think that, again, anytime you get any kind of opt-out request, or anything associated with that, as these laws go into effect, as federal regulation, is, potentially, happening, as early as next year. I think that, I think it would be good, again, for any brand to, they take this time to, assess, do I know what data I'm collecting? Do I know who owns it? Do I know where it's stored? Am I managing all of those, data points and data signals appropriately?
That makes sense. Well, this is actually a perfect segue sort of into, our next kind of theme, which is really around data privacy. And I know that you actually work a lot with clients, on this topic. So, brand marketers are now facing new headwinds in the data world today. Data privacy regulations like GDPR and CCPA cropping up everywhere. Now, I know these are more than just acronyms. So it might be helpful to kind of understand, what is CCPA, what is GDPR, and how are they different?
Sure. So the CCPA is the California Consumer Privacy Act. So that was major regulation at the state level, that now, as of January 1st, exists in California. And again, starting July 1st, will start being enforced, which means we will start seeing the state's government start levying, any kind of fine or anything that they see as, going against, the new law. Starting next week, they will start actually enforcing those regulations. So what that means is, companies have essentially had the first half of this year, the pandemic notwithstanding, to, again, know that this law is now in effect, and to make sure that, again, if what your company does falls into what the CCPA covers, that you now are kind of up to speed. If you are to, not to, talk more about audits, but if, you were to get an audit, to make sure that you are compliant with the new Consumer Privacy Act, that you are not, that you're not going to face any fines or, outside the regulation.
Great. How about GDPR? On that?
Yeah, so GDPR over in Europe is definitely a little different. I think that in Europe in general, they have approached privacy, fundamentally different from a opt-in versus opt-out standpoint. So by that I mean, in Europe, essentially, you can only be tracked if you opt in to be tracked, as opposed to over here, where you are tracked until you are you formally asked to opt out to be tracked. Obviously that affects things like scale and other things, but at the highest level, that's probably the fundamental difference between how we do things over here versus how they do things over there. And, the GDPR is, a privacy regulation that, when we get to federal regulation over here, while I do not believe it'll be as strict, there will certainly be things that they will model over here, if they haven't already done so at the state level, off of ways they're enforcing GDPR over there.
Right. Yeah, that's a big difference. Needing to opt in is definitely is more favoring the consumer, favoring privacy in GDPR, needing to opt out, that sounds like it's kind of still favoring the advertisers, because the onus is still on to the consumer to physically go in there and say, I want to opt out. But let's assume that a consumer does choose to, opt out in CCP, or choose to opt in, or choose just not to receive any type of ads in under GDPR. What happens then? Is there something like a right to be forgotten? What happens after that?
Sure. So, I think that, the biggest, and again, this is, the enforcement's going to start, on July 1st week. I think the biggest, based on we've seen how the penalties have been levied, on the GDPR front, are going to be fines, upwards of, 4% of revenue for a company. Again, I think it really depends on, who they decide to go after. And I think that an interesting piece of this is, again, since the enforcement period hasn't started, it's been kind of fun to, kind of speculate, are they going to start off by going, directly after Google and Facebook? How big a fish are they going to use to, I don't want to say set an example, but, kind of, depending on how much they want to emphasize the importance of the law. I think like any law, how strictly the enforcement of the law comes down is going to dictate how strictly people abide by it. So, I think that it's going to be interesting to see, once the enforcement period begins, who they see in violation of CCPA, and then, how they decide to go after these people, and at what level.
Yeah, I know that the penalty for non-compliance in Europe for GDPR is actually quite substantial. I mean, getting fined 4% of your company's revenues for not abiding by GDPR, that's pretty huge. And I know that for some of the smaller companies that, that I've heard about, some of them actually just chosen to stop working in Europe because they don't want to face that type of liability. Would you say that this is now becoming more of a trend? First Europe, now California. Are you seeing privacy on the horizon for other states and regions of the world?
I mean, I think that Washington, most notably as a state, has drafted, regulation at the state level. I think I mentioned before that, as more and more states start to address this, federal regulation is not too far behind. I think that one thing that, I think that we should kind of, again, take a step back and appreciate is that the adtech industry, if you will, has had the luxury of not really being regulated at all by the government. We've had the IAB and really been able to kind of self-police, if you will, and kind of set our own standards. I think that, whether you look at it as unfortunately or not, that is changing, and that there will be now state or federal law that regulates kind of, how we collect this data, and, what we can do with it.
Yeah. So if someone does, exercise their right to, they say, like, I had opted in to have cookies collect and track my whereabouts, let's just say, and now I've decided to change my mind. What are requirements? What do companies need to do under, say, these regulations to follow that? Do they need to, for example, show where or how data has been tracked from the consumer? Like, is that something that the brands need to disclose? What are some of the things that they are required to do?
Sure. So so formally, the way it should work under the law is, if you get a request, a organization has X amount of days. I forget if it's 30 or 90 days to review that request and either effectively decide if they need to comply with it or not. So, there is now a process, and this is part of what the law and the regulation does, is it helps put in place a process of, okay, you've gotten this opt-out from user X, or let's say, a million user X's. What is my responsibility now as an organization to make sure that I'm complying with it, that I'm complying with it in a timely fashion. And, also, is their request reasonable, again, practically speaking, under the law, or is it unreasonable? And by that, I mean, are they asking, for, one email address to be removed, or are they asking for, a full, again, audit, and, copy of everything that they've ever tracked for the entire history of the company? So, obviously, no one's going to ask for that. But again, these are the types of things that the law has to set. They have to set, to your point, the workflow, if you will, of what has to happen, express certain parameters like timeliness, of how you have to respond as an organization. And then again, set a bar, if you will, from under the law for, what is a reasonable request for removal of the staff.
That's a lot of a lot of things that people have to really look into here. I recall just a few months ago, before this whole pandemic happened, I was at a conference in San Francisco, a ramp up, and I know that data privacy was one of the big topics there. And it sounded like, CCP had just taken effect, but it didn't seem like a whole lot of companies were ready, just yet. A lot of them are still kind of scratching their head saying, what is CCPA? And I think the thought it was that not a whole lot of companies were really prepared for that. So now we're in, mid-June. CCPA has already been in effect for a while now, half a year. Would you say that a lot of companies, clients, folks that you talk to, would you say they're ready for CCPA?
I don't know if ready is the right word. I think that compliance is really what they're looking for. If they're looking for anything, I think that companies really fall into two categories. I don't think that there are many brands, and I could be totally wrong here, but again, in folks I've talked to, there aren't many brands that are kind of ready for it. They're either on top of it, or they're kind of 0 to 100. They're really not even scoped for understanding what they would need, again, if they got an opt-out tomorrow, or I guess not tomorrow, I guess next week. What enforcement could the government come down on them with? So I think that it's really more just kind of making sure that those brands that are more on the zero side understand what they need to do to get up to compliance, and again, I think it's easy as just doing a data audit, and just assessing and understanding as an organization what you are collecting from consumers, so that if you get an opt-out, you can understand what you need to do internally, what that workflow would be, who you need to talk to, and respond to that in a timely fashion.
Yeah, that's so true, and it sounds like a good way for companies to start in doing this is I guess reviewing their data assets, kind of a data audit that we talked about a little bit before.
Yeah. Again, if you can, really take one thing away from this, I can't kind of stress this enough. Look at data and data signals as assets. And when you do your audits, really look and say, okay, what data signals do I have access to, and really use that as a filter for, again, what can I get out of this? Not even monetarily, but from a customer journey standpoint. There are several different applications for how you can use different data sets. I think that, again, you just need to understand and look at and approach the audit as, what do I have available to me internally? Again, for example, if third-party cookies were to go away tomorrow, what would I have left, quote unquote, and what could I potentially do with it? What is your, I don't want to say contingency plan, because at the end of the day, this is going to become, the forefront of, everyone's data-driven strategy very soon. But I think that, again, the purpose of the audit is, assess so that you understand what assets you have.
Got it. And does Promatica Consulting provide that type of service?
Yes, we do.
Oh, interesting. All right. Well, that's good. this has been a great conversation here. And we actually have quite a lot of questions coming in. So
Sure.
maybe we can start addressing some of those. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So first question is around third-party cookies. So how are agencies reacting to the news regarding Google's third-party data phase-out announcement for Chrome? Is there a go-to backup plan that a majority of agencies are opting to use for a while, for now, until a more formal industry-wide solution is implemented?
Great question. Definitely like the second half of it, because I think that, to that point, a lot of it is speculation. This Google sandbox, different types of, identity resolution solutions, LiveRAM, Criteo, Live Intent. I think a lot of it is, really speculative until a more formal, again, industry-wide solution is implemented. Right now, there is no standard solution. I don't believe one is going to be announced tomorrow. So I think that, agencies, I think that their job is, especially hard because, brands are not necessarily at the forefront of this. It's not necessarily their priority. I think that it's part of the agency's job to kind of stress, hey, you need to be paying attention to this. And, we kind of recommend, again, a data audit, for example, we recommend, taking these steps accordingly until the fog has kind of lifted and the solution, again, industry-wide going forward is a little bit more clear.
Yeah, that makes sense here. And I know that there actually are different proposals to replace the traditional third-party cookie model. Their LiveRamp has something. IAB, Google. Any thoughts on which of these replacements or alternatives might bubble up on top?
Ooh, good question. I think that the different solutions. I think that most solutions, from what I've seen, really exist around the browser most recently, and kind of, using almost using the browser as the data signal instead of the cookie device, which I find kind of interesting. I don't know how savvy everyone is on the call, talking about different solutions like Google Turtle Dove, and how they've kind of approached kind of in the sandbox how to address taking different data signals and applying them again, for example, at the browser level, so that you can again almost use your Chrome single sign-in as that opt-in, because again you're signing into Chrome as that opt-in piece that you can then be tracked again as at the browser level. I think that solutions like that are probably the ones that I've seen as the most I don't want to say impressive, but probably I would say the best in my opinion going forward.
No, that's makes a lot of sense here. So here's a kind of a question related to the current environment, the pandemic. So as you know, in the age of COVID-19, being able to do contact tracing is becoming sort of a thing. I know it's being done in other parts of the world. I guess in Asia and South Korea, they actually are doing contact tracing. What that means is that if you've sort of been exposed to the virus, they can sort of track places that you've been to before and notify all those folks that, hey, you might have been exposed. There are some companies now that are starting to develop apps that can do contact tracing. I know Google and Apple have announced that they're looking at that as a way to sort of keep people healthy. What are your thoughts on, say, being able to track people in times of a pandemic, while also trying to maintain consumer privacy? We talk a lot about the data privacy. So what are your thoughts?
Sure. I think that this comes down to a question we've definitely discussed before, in recent years, and that's, kind of privacy versus national security. and the best interest of the greater good, if you will. I know, to your points, there are certainly use cases internationally where this is done successfully. I don't know if there are any folks in Australia on the call, but I know down there they actually make you, check into every bar that you go into via an app, so they can track exactly where you're going, literally if you do go out, so that, again, if someone is infected, they can track everyone, via their device where they've been. So I definitely don't oppose it in terms of a solution. Again, I definitely think, given the recent curve numbers, or the lack thereof that we're seeing, I think that unfortunately it may be something that is necessary. So again, I think that as long as the application is practical, and again, it is being used successfully internationally, I don't really see a problem with it. Ethically, from a privacy standpoint, if you're using it, again, for something that hopefully we won't have to do again for a very long time.
Yeah, I know it's something that's it often becomes a question of just ethics and how people kind of view that, national security, national health versus respecting people's privacy. And I think that 6 months ago, no one could have envisioned that we'd be in a pandemic, and the thought of collecting people's location data would not have even thought, people wouldn't have thought that that's something that would be so closely tied to say national health, let's just say.
Yep.
But it's something that's now becoming more and more front and center. So another question, which is around the agency model. So the agency has changed a lot over the last 10 years. How does Promatica differ from a traditional agency?
Sure. I'll do a little bit of a shameless plug. I think that, again, we are very, data and technology first. I think we understand, again, things as simple as, looking at data points as assets, and, really understanding that there are certain things, again, as the industry changes, very rapidly recently, again, with, Google Chrome cookie announcements, understanding things like, does your company even need a CDP, assessing technology. I think that, we really stress, first and foremost, understanding the data and the tech that, we work with, nowadays every day in this industry. And, that's just not limited to the conversation we're having right now. That also includes, ad servers, DSPs, SSPs, again, any kind of technology that has, evolved as part of our industry that, we have to work with to really, again, practically speaking, get the most, if you will, out of your media dollars. That's just something we really like to stress in our approach.
Good to know. And I think that agencies are actually really, really important, because they can actually help explain a lot of the technology, a lot of the details, especially around marketing technology. So I definitely see agencies almost as an extension of someone like us. Like, we make software, but we also need folks to help evangelize and explain that and educate folks, on what software does. So I definitely see that as being important. Another question is, can CDPs help with programmatic media campaigns? Yeah.
Can they help with programmatic media campaigns? I would say potentially from a customer journey standpoint, if that's going to be just a point of engagement. From the activation piece, it's going to be very different than how you would normally engage with a DMP, for example, where you just kind of create a retargeting segment and push it out, or a lookalike model and push it out. But yeah, there are certainly some applications, in terms of understanding, if there is a media signal in your customer journey, just kind of assessing that. And managing frequency that way, and yeah, just kind of including that as a signal that way.
Yeah, CDPs can, in fact, help with some of the programmatic media campaigns in the sense that people often use CDPs to help create targeted segments. A lot of those segments are actually built off of first-party data.
Yep.
Customers who have bought the most from me, customers who are part of my loyalty program, customers who have bought 5 times in the last 30 days. That's all like first-party data. And then once you create the segments, you can sort of push those segments off to a DSP. If you want to create lookalike audiences, you can push first-party data to, say, a data onboarder, like, say, a LiveRamp. And from there, they can sort of marry that PII with third-party anonymized cookies that are used by, say, the Trade Desk or MediaMath, et cetera. So to answer that question, yes, CDPs can, in fact, help with pushing out targeted audience segments over to a DSP for activation. Another question, kind of interesting one here. Are CDPs just the latest fad, or are they here to stay?
Sure. Great question. Yeah. Like any new piece of tech. Is this a fad? I think that the management and emphasis on first party data is here to stay. I think that, again, the reason we're kind of having this conversation and the reason that CDPs have kind of been emphasized over the last couple of years is because, I think that it's understood that, a lot of the third party targeting and a lot of just the targeting in general that we've been able to enjoy kind of so far in really in all of adtech's existence is going away and is going to fundamentally change, specifically for reasons of privacy. So I think that, again, it's more just a question of, will technology that exists to manage your first party data, is that here to stay? I think the answer is yes. Will there be another acronym? Will CDPs evolve into something else? Sure. But yeah, I think fundamentally, having a platform to, manage the people that you engage with internally, that is here to stay.
Yeah, that makes sense here. So another question here. So let's just say that this is more of a clarification question around data privacy.
Sure.
What do you exactly mean by being served a note about cookies collected? And can you clarify what you mean as an example, the right to be forgotten?
Sure. So I think so. The first part of the question was in reference to, you can serve a notice to an organization. Again, I hate picking on the Gap. We'll just use the Gap as an example. You can serve notice, beyond, again, a very easy example of, you get an email from the Gap, you scroll down to the bottom of that email, manage preferences, unsubscribe, whatever it says, you click on unsubscribe. From a workflow standpoint, that is you, formally sending a request to, again, the Gap, whatever organization, to say, I no longer want to be tracked, AKA I no longer want my information in your system. And, that essentially is, to answer the second question, that is essentially the right to be forgotten, that you, in theory, have a right to request that an organization has your data, and that you, as the individual whom that data belongs to, has the right to request that data be removed, and that you, again, be quote unquote forgotten by that organization.
Wow. So that really means going into the actual database, potentially, of where that individual's data is stored, and purging that.
I mean, that would be part of the opt-out. And I guess under the CCPA and any other regulation, that's really what the law is kind of intended to do, to make sure if these requests happen, that I guess they don't fall on deaf ears, and that there is a formal workflow for I guess if your company even has to comply, and if you do have to comply, what it is that you have to do to actually be compliant.
Got it. Great. And one question here on just how clients and agencies are managing in this time of the pandemic and in this recession. Do you feel clients are moving forward more with some of the initiatives? Say digital transformation might be one, because they have more time to work on strategic projects, or do you feel they're scaling back because of budgetary concerns?
Great question. I think that it's a little bit of both, to be honest. Because I think that if you are savvy, part of that digital transformation and part of that assessment of your own first-party data will lead to a lot of efficiencies, because you won't be spending as much on third-party data, and you won't need to as much go outward to do things like understand your customer journey, and other types of use cases. You will have all of that in-house. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think that part of these new budgetary restrictions will kind of force agencies, clients, what have you, to evolve and to get more savvy in terms of understanding the data, just because that should endemically lead to some efficiencies anyway.
Makes sense. And one question about the data audit. I think this has kind of inspired a lot of interest here. What are the first steps of doing a data audit?
Sure. First steps. Again, assessment of where the data lives. Not even before even you get to who the owners are. Looking at your organization and understanding, what teams or what silos or what pieces of the organization, what data signals they are potentially collecting. And, again, it's really as simple as, putting it together in an Excel doc, just so, again, the purpose is to have it all in one place so that you can build a strategy around the data signals that that you have, and centralizing it. You can, again, from, practically speaking, build customer journeys and, a couple other different use cases to, again, the point being, understand what you have internally. So that if you need to go externally, you're not wasting money on, developing partnerships or going after data sets that you might not necessarily need, because you already have that information via some sort of channel or some sort of team that you may not know is already collecting it or already has some sort of relationship. But again, the purpose is, and the first step really is to understand, just literally put a list together of, what are the teams that collect these signals? What are those signals? And then again, step two, who are those people, so we can work with those people for potential, analysis and activation.
Wow, that's very helpful. Yeah, data audit, we agree. Just kind of before you go and invest a lot of dollars on a piece of technology, definitely figure out what type of data you have in-house. Kind of, it's almost like basic housekeeping.
It is.
Know how many pieces of t-shirts you have before you go out and buy a new one.
Right, organize that closet. There you go.
Organize that closet. That makes a lot of sense. And when we have to stay at home these days, or organizing closets sounds like a fun thing to do.
That's right.
Yeah. So Aaron, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. And I'm sure our audience really, really appreciates that as well. Thank you everyone for attending today's lively webinar. Again, if you have any questions, want to follow up, send us a note. And look forward to having the next one.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks, everyone. This has been awesome.
It's been awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.